This is just going to be a comparison between Devil May Cry 5 and God of War 3. So both games, they are very similar in how they play, hack and slash oriented. God of War 3 will have more puzzles, like a new game plus bonus. Devil May Cry 5, you're playing as 3 different characters. 4, if you want to include in the DLC, you play as Virgil, right? So yeah, both games, they're really good. And for this comparison, this is going to be like a relatively closer comparison. So yeah, there's not one clear-cut winner here. So first off, content. I like to start on content. So content, both games have, like their story. God of War 3 story is, longer. 6 hours longer than a Devil May Cry 5 story. A Devil May Cry 5, like, it's set up like into like chapters. God of War 3 is just one long sequence, like one journey, long journey. Like from at the very start scene, like where you see like the gods of Olympus, like on that hill, to the very end, Kratos fought Zeus, right? The stories, God of War 3 has a better story as well. The story like is better overall, more themes in the story. The Devil May Cry 5 story is a little bit short, and it does kind of feel rushed at times. But yeah, it's not really. Both games are what it does strongest is its gameplay. Side content, Devil May Cry 5 gets the advantage in side content. God of War 3 just has a challenge modes. So the challenge modes are basically like something where Kratos, if you guys know Kratos, the main character in God of War 3, Kratos has to fight enemies in this one arena, and it's different stipulations. So for example, you gotta throw an enemy off the arena, or like I can only take out a certain amount of enemies, or there's one where you have to where you can't use like weapons. Devil May Cry 5 has this wave mode, so this arcade mode, Bloody Palace, I'm pretty sure you guys know. So you can play as any of the 4 characters: Dante, V, Nero, Virgil. If you have the DLC, obvious 4. So play as any of them, and then there's waves. So waves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on. And the enemy variety changes, the enemy style changes. And the difficulty changes every 20 waves. The difficulty sets up. So the first 20 waves is very easy. The next 20 waves is harder. And yeah. So God of War 3 as well has a side mode, side content where you can fight an evil version of yourself. And it has all the moves you have, right? Yeah. All the moves that you have. So it's very important to, practice your dodging, parrying, and all that. So overall, DMC5, this is Bloody Palace, and the Bloody Palace is, you can go so deep in Bloody Palace, and it gets very hard. Yeah, and yeah, so overall, side content goes to DMC5, but overall, story is better in God of War 3. So overall, enjoyability, I enjoyed both games a lot. Especially in DMC5, once you play as Dante, it's like the gloves are off, you're getting these new combo sets, God of War 3 for the most part, the combos, they're linked to upgrade systems, right? Both games are, but it's a link to upgrade systems. Both games will have blocking, parrying. The parrying is a little bit easier in God of War 3. And God of War 3 does have annoying puzzles. So the puzzles, they feel kind of annoying. Certain puzzles will feel annoying, like in God of War 3. As far as I remember, Devil May Cry 5 doesn't have any of those annoying puzzles. It'll have like boss gauntlets, where you gotta fight like a certain boss within a certain area, or there'll be like these types of illusions that you have to find that give you bonus missions, right? Side missions. So yeah, but for the most part, there's not a whole lot of puzzles in DMC5. But God of War 3, like almost every God of War is known for having puzzles in it. So in my opinion, the puzzles, some of the puzzles they took away from the enjoyment of God of War 3. But for the most part, God of War 3 is centered around fighting enemies. Both games are centered around fighting enemies. That's the main gameplay loop. Enemy variety, Devil May Cry 5. There's a ton of enemy variety here. God of War 3 has slightly better enemy variety in that, you have the sirens, the minotaurs, the a chimera, that lion deer variant, snake variant, which is very cool. You have bosses. The bosses are huge. You have these goat archers, I believe you call them. You got the main skeleton, a Cerebrus, the baby Cerebrus. So yeah, lots of different, enemies. And Devil May Cry 5, there's lots of enemies. I don't remember other names, but yeah, this is gonna have some footage on it. But you have enemies that can teleport, heavy hitting enemies. You have the big bosses as well. So overall bosses, enemies, they feel better in God of War 3. Another thing too, the bosses are better in God of War 3. The bosses in Devil May Cry don't get good until near the end of the game. Early on in the game, the bosses are just not good. God of War 3 does not suffer from this. God of War 3 starts out with Poseidon, then eventually you get to Hades, then eventually you get to the main Cerberus, and then you get to, later on in the game, you get to Hercules, the Ice Scorpion, and then you have Zeus, right, the big bad. And it all depends. Like for the final boss, I really think that, do you like fighting Zeus versus fighting Virgil? What's more enjoyable? But I personally, because the battle sequences were very, it was longer fighting Zeus than it was Virgil, right? And keep in mind, God of War 3 is kind of like the end to the Greek saga, right? So yeah, that was the last battle in the Greek mythology saga, right? So yeah. So overall, I feel like the enemies and the bosses, they are better in God of War 3. A little bit on mechanics, I feel both games, it's pretty equal. It's an equal category mechanics. When you play, it has a triple S rank, so the more you change up like your style of fighting, and the more various weapons you use without getting hit, the higher your style ranking goes. So you want to get the triple S rank, which is very high, right? God of War 3 is just, same idea, except it's mostly based on hits. 50 hits, 100 hits, You can even stack up to 200 hits if you're really good without getting hit, right? And yeah, but overall mechanics, the dodge feels very smooth. The, blocking parrying feels very smooth. Parrying is a little bit, annoying to do in Devil May Cry 5. You gotta hit while the enemy is about to hit you, right? So yeah. So overall, though, I feel like God of War 3, the overall, for this category, mechanics is pretty equal. Mechanics of both games are pretty equal. The jumping feels, very, although you can jump a little bit higher in DMC5 once you get the upgrades. Difficulty, both games, depending on what difficulty you play on, both games have 5 different difficulties. God of War 3, easy, normal, hard, chaos, titan, or is it a god mode or something? Then Devil May Cry has it, so there's human difficulty, which is the easy. Then there's like some sort of a no mercy difficulty, and then the hardest is Dante must die. And there's other difficulties as well. Now Dante, so on both games, the hardest difficulty is going to be very challenging. It's pretty equal. It's just you get what you put in, you get out of. So basically, like, you have to, know the game, the parrying very well, the dodging. Dodging is very important on the hardest difficulty. It's more so, Devil May Cry 5 is like, the enemies are more hit spongy. So the enemies can take a lot more hits. And God of War 3 is more like, you die a lot faster on the hardest difficulty. So 2 hits, 3 hits will kill you if you're not careful. And the bosses are a lot harder too as well on both games, on the hardest difficulty. But overall, like, a normal to normal difficulty, they're pretty, because God of War 3 is longer. It is a longer game, so you're going to run into more obstacles. And you're only playing as Kratos, right? It's going to feel more difficult. DMC5, because every character feels different. V is slower. V is the slowest. Nero is kind of a balance. Dante is the fastest and heavy hitter as well. A jack of all trades, right? So you can kind of change it up and fight the same enemies like with different characters, and it's going to be easier. So Devil May Cry in that sense is slightly easier. So overall replayability. So replayability, I feel like Devil May Cry 5. Devil May Cry 5, because of the what it has is the Bloody Palace gives it a huge advantage here. I wish God of War 3 had a waves mode. That'd be so cool if it had a like an arcade mode, and not a challenge mode, like a full-on arcade mode. That'd be just so cool. But Bloody Palace is just so epic, and you can replay it over for hours and hours and hours and never get tired of it. And if you die in Bloody Palace, you gotta start from the beginning, from round 1, or wave 0 or whatever, or floor 1. And every 20 waves, again, the difficulty stacks up. So the first 20 waves is easier. Waves 40 to 60 is going to be considered hard. So yeah, And every character you play as will have different, you can approach it differently in the play style, right? And God of War 3, however, because it has a longer story and this is a conclusion, this really feels like, you know, everything comes together well here, you know, like in his quest for vengeance and giving up that near the end of the game. God of War 3 does have that replayable story. But God of War 3, has, again, it's going to drag on a little bit more. Devil May Cry 5 has parts in it too that are just annoying. Both games will have that. But because Devil May Cry is shorter, you're going to replay it more times. God of War 3 is longer. You're going to, you know, play it once. I take a while to come back to it, right? There's a lot to process playing through that whole thing. But yeah, it is easier to replay Devil May Cry 5. Also, in terms of replayability, God of War 3 has this thing in it where basically what happens, you can, there's New Game Plus, so you can replay the game again with a different uniform bonus. So there's like 4 or 5 different uniforms. Every uniform has a different bonus associated with, let's say, magic or some sort of damage. So, for example, there's one uniform that will give you 2 times as much damage. And this is throughout the entire New Game Plus, right? So once you defeated the game the first time, and there are certain artifacts that you have to get in order to unlock these uniforms. So these uniforms are very cool. There's one where Kratos has blue paint instead of red paint, and this one gives you, I can't remember what the special was, but it's like infinite magic. There's another one that gives you, I can't remember, 4 times as much damage, but the enemies, they only do, they'll do twice as much damage to you. So yeah. So that's another thing with replayability. This really adds to the replayability of God of War. So yeah, a uniform board. And yeah, so a little bit on visuals, soundtrack. So visuals is not really fair because it's 9 years apart. These games are 9 years apart. But you play the remastered. God of War 3 got remastered twice. Devil May Cry 5, I think it got remastered once, and I can't believe it's only 4 years old. But visuals, no, soundtrack. Overall, the soundtrack in both games are very good. Really, really good. Both games will have it so each boss has their own soundtrack, and the tone of the sound or the music goes up, right? The further you get into the, you know, the boss. Hades, just type up the Hades God of War 3 boss. Oh, it's so good. Like the Hades God of War 3 boss soundtrack, it's so good. You know, you have Zeus has his own soundtrack, Poseidon. Different areas you go to, the underworld, the labyrinth, the, you know, swamp. There's this garden area that has you know, a time a freeze mechanic. That too as well has its own soundtrack. Devil May Cry 5, it's very heavy metal type soundtrack. There is some soul music in it, and anime is very, you know, anime like has some creative like instrumentals, very creative instrumentals. I'm not sure if Devil May Cry is considered anime, but anyways, with this one though, it's Devil May Cry 5. Each character has its own, will have its own soundtrack, which is very cool as well. So, you know, overall, no, we went over like content, side content, mechanics, difficulty, replayability, enjoyment. So both games are really enjoyable. Like I said before, they're very enjoyable. And this is very close. But I feel that because memorability, you know, how memorable is it as well? God of War 3 feels more memorable. The experience is going to last a lot more. That's another thing too that God of War 3 has. It's more memorable. It's a more memorable experience. So special abilities, last category. Every character in Devil May Cry has his own special ability. Dante will have the Sin Devil trigger. Virgil will have a Sin Devil trigger. Nero has a Devil trigger. Then V can summon this massive beast, and they all have different bonuses. They attack faster. Your damage is a lot, you know, higher. You can do a lot more damage. You can take damage. You can heal. So yeah, God of War 3 for the most part, the special abilities linked in like magic attacks, electric blade attacks, the, you know, overall what's it called again, a crow control, do more damage. So yeah, there's lots. There is a lot in. There is more. Feels like there's more special abilities in God of War 3, but just the Dante Sin Devil trigger alone is so badass. It's one of the most OP video game modes, or video game super moves, special moves, or modes. It's amazing. This thing is amazing. Sin Devil trigger is amazing. So overall categories: God of War 3, good story. God of War 3 as well gets more. It is more memorable. The gameplay, you know, well, Devil May Cry 5, it is more replayable because it is shorter and it has the Bloody Palace mode. Mechanics equal, difficulty pretty equal. Overall, special abilities is pretty equal. However, I feel like Devil May Cry had better special abilities. Comboing, that's another thing to comboing. I feel like Devil May Cry 5. It's another equal categories. There's lots of equal categories here. Lots of equal categories. Soundtracks equal. So overall, it's just basically, this is a very close comparison. I know some people might not be as high on DMC 5 as me, especially because I did not like DMC 4, but DMC 5 really turned it around in my opinion. I really started to like it more. So like, share, subscribe, guys. God of War 3 and Devil May Cry 5. Thanks for watching. More comparisons coming soon.